listening to the Astral Hour. I'm your host, Astral Meadow. Join me as we take a glimpse into the mysterious. Welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce you to my friend Wendy Weiss. Wendy is an intuitive energy healer who focuses on lunar-centered astrology as a guide for both astrological and personal exploration. She works with many different intuitive healing modalities, but specializes in astral navigation, lunar guidance, and moon journaling. She is a certified leadership and life coach through Coach for Life and an associate certified coach through International Coach Federation. Through these programs, she has worked with clients all across the country. She also practices yoga nidra and has completed certified training from Shiva Shakti School of Yoga. Thank you so much for being on the show today. So how did you get into this stuff, and which subject did you start with?
Ooh, that's a... So I guess the most concentrated that I could say that it happened is I started with the coaching in 2017.
Okay.
And I have worked in education and writing, and I've worked in a lot of community, so it just felt like the next right thing to do. I think you had talked about how people seem to always come up to you and wanting to talk to you about all these topics.
Right.
It's the same thing. People just always are like, oh, I just feel so relaxed around you, and I can tell you everything. I haven't even told my partner this. I have never even told my brother this,
Right.
So people got into really intimate spaces and comfort in sharing things with me. So I just thought, well, I'm not really going to be in education in that way anymore. So I thought I'd move towards that direction because I really love working one-on-one and then in groups.
Uh-huh.
And then from there, in 2019, and, I've studied astrology, I've studied energy work, I've done, lots of things all throughout my life. But in 2019, I was preparing to turn 50 in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to take that year to just prepare for that. It was a milestone for me, and I felt like, to be in practice and presence and ritual for a year was really important. And I didn't know what was going to happen. So I sat on my birthday, which is January 19th, and I just sat and sat with this thought. And I had been studying mandalas for a long time, and I just ended up sitting, and all of a sudden I started drawing basically the cycles of the moon came through a mandala. And
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and I thought, I guess this is my yearly ritual, is to follow the moon and the new moon cycles. And so I created these mandalas each month for myself and went through this process of following the moon phases and, doing different practice with each of those. And then, really quickly, I got this sense of I'm not supposed to be doing this alone.
Right.
And so in March, just a couple months after,
Right.
I started holding the moon circles.
Oh,
and,
wow.
it's morphed into different names over the years, women's wisdom circles. And I really felt called to work with women. Specifically, for me, the moon has, that feminine, divine feminine aspect. And, of course, all energy has all forms, but
Right.
for me, I was being called specifically to work because I had denied my own feminine for a long time for lots of reasons. And anyway, so I started working with small groups, and all my education background and writing background just kind of all came together, and it was powerful and beautiful. And I joke because, the mandala, when I was doing it alone, it was incredibly rich and deep, but then when other people were there and the dynamic and the synergy of that, I was joking, it was like driving a steering wheel. The mandala became a steering wheel. I'm like, oh my gosh, how do you manage all of this energy and all of this brilliance that comes through with all these women? So it was really a beautiful, humbling, expansive year of moving towards that turning 50. And so, you know, it came in intuitively and I just followed that.
Right.
And then, you know, the moon just kept sending messages, and then eventually other planets and other constellations started to speak to me, and the archetypal and mythic, you know, the storytelling started to come through. And so I just followed that. And so I've been working with an intuitive astrologer, Virginia Rosenberg, for a couple of years now. And so I just keep deepening my study in all these different areas.
That's so awesome. I think about Carl Jung a lot when I think of mandalas. And when I first started kind of studying him, before I'd ever painted my first mandala, like I was reading about them, and he was describing how you can really tap into this like unconscious energy. It's almost like it wants to be expressed, but so like you make the mandala and then you look, okay, this is a circle, you know, so this means that's like the feminine, or so it's cool to like see someone like really go further into that than just the drawing, but actually like listen to what the mandala was saying and like take it further. That's so cool. I've never seen that like put into practice like that. So all right. So, how are the moon phases interconnected to our menstrual cycles? Is there a pattern there?
Well, you know, this is interesting because, yes, obviously.
Right.
I was just reading about this yesterday, and around the idea that some women start at the new moon and some women start at the full moon kind of thing. And you know, of course, women go through perimenopause and menopause, and that all shifts again. And I think that's part of that crone initiation. And that's really where I was feeling like I was going anyway. So the moon showed up. Right. And in the process, you know, my cycle has shifted between new moon and full moon, or gone all over the place. So, you know, I think what I've learned and what I'm intuiting is that these phases are malleable constants that help us anchor at different points. So no matter where we are in our cycle on that cycle, we have some anchor point, and the moon just kind of helps us, you know, guides us wherever we kind of fall in that. But kind of going back a little bit farther, actually I did this when I was in my graduate studies for education in linguistics. I studied moon. And moon comes from monat, which is month. And so like the etymology of moon actually speaks to cycles. It speaks to this, you know, 28-day or month, you know, I'm putting that in air quotes because, of course, we know time is wobbly, and, and we kind of try to fit it into this little box that doesn't always work out the same way. So I think that's kind of, the moon is wobbly too. The moon has a wobble. So, you know, it just, to me, it's just this metaphor, you know, and it's this thing that plays out and shows us, you know, we're always changing, but we're on a cycle, and these things will return and you know, leave and return and leave, you know, that life, death, life cycle, that is our cycle, that is menstruation.
Right. For sure. I'm like right on the full moon here, but I was thinking about, it seems to go right now with the moon perfectly, but do you think like 2 weeks from now, you know, or if you're not with the full moon, you're the new moon, so you're going to be kind of tired and depleted on the new moon, whereas for me, I'm like super energized. Like I love new moons. There's so much there, but on full moons, especially right now because of how it's lining up, I am just like, you know, like I feel like I'm getting a double whammy. So I always wonder, like, if you were doing something like moon journaling, but also tracking your cycle, it would be different for every person because you would be at a different phase, you know. So I always wondered, like, how, because I've seen this, I don't know who she is, but I've read, and she does sort of like what you're doing with moon journaling, but just with menstrual cycles. Like, so she's tracking every week. You're at like this different phase, just like the moon. So I was wondering if somehow, you know, that there was a link there. So of course there is. So
Absolutely.
that's super interesting. Let's see. Could you go more into the moon journaling classes, and do you create the journals yourself, or? Okay, could you just sort of go into what they look like?
Sure. So our moon circles start on the new moon. Okay, obviously. And then the way that, again, I do a real intuitive version of this, so it may be different than the way other people have traditionally used it. But for me, that new moon is really about resetting, and this is pretty classic, but resetting, refining, and setting intention.
Right.
And so people get caught up with intention as goal. And I like to back off of that because the intention is going to go with the moon around the whole cycle.
Okay.
And we may start somewhere thinking, I know exactly what I'm going for, right? And then as you move through these moon phases, that shifts. And so what happens is the journal actually is created by each participant.
Okay. So they're really creating it as the month goes.
Yes.
They're filling it out. And
Yes. And so the way that the journal kind of is prompted is through journal prompts that I offer based on intuitive kinds of information and that I get from the zodiac sign, the moon phase, and the new moon, like say like this last new moon was in Virgo. So I consider that a Virgo moon cycle, right? All the way around, even though it changes into Libra at some point. So we follow this Virgo, and then when the sun changes, everything starts to shift anyway. But you're still in that Virgo. It's still a Virgo.
That energy is very prominent.
Yes, yeah, like an overtone, right? So this is kind of the container we're in. And so what we do is we meet up at each of the quarter moons, so new moon, first quarter, full.
So like 4 times a month.
Okay. And then in what I call the cross quarters or the crescents, right? Then I would just send out something by email, and then to keep that journal going, because each phase has its own energy to be met and to be sat with and to be with. So that's kind of the process in a nutshell, is that we just move through with writing prompts, and then the energetic readings of the times and the archetype mythology, the planets. Sometimes I get into some of the planets, but mostly we just stick with the moon. I really like the moon to lead that. And so everything that's kind of affecting the moon at that point. And, the moon checks through the zodiac each month.
So you're going to... all the astrology comes in, because I was going to ask you that later, but it makes sense. It's already kind of written in to the moon for that month, because you're already acknowledging the archetype of that. Yeah,
we touch everything each month through the moon. The moon's the great caretaker. She checks in and how are you doing? How's it going, Pluto? And goes into each zodiac sign. So it's a thing of beauty to follow what we normally think of in a year's term in a month, and then to see how that evolves each month.
Right. So it's like the macro or the micro. So it's a month, but if you could kind of stretch that concept out for the whole year and kind of see it that way, or you can crunch it into, okay, this is so cool. I definitely want to do one of these classes, because I guess it's probably been like 5 or 6 months now. I've been doing my own little rituals, but just with new and full moons. But I definitely feel like there's all these points where I'm missing energy for sure, So for like the new moon, that's my big celebration, because I have the energy. So I've been doing like a cacao, like the ceremonial dose. And me and Justin sit down and we get a little notebook out and we write, things that we kind of just went through, like anything that might have came up that we didn't like, or made us, start kind of see something where we're like, okay, I want to work on that. So we have a release, 5 things to release and 5 things to bring in. And it is so awesome. Like, cause the intention and the acknowledgement of these things, it really it's changed my life. And it's such a small little thing, but it really helps me evaluate it. And there was a couple months back where something came up and we got distracted and didn't do it. And the whole month I felt like kind of flustered. I was like, there's no game plan. Like, what am I supposed to be focusing on? So now I'm like, even if it's a day or two after the new moon, I'm like, we are still making the time to do it, because I mean, it's necessary. So like every time we write, so we write one thing, we release down and we take a sip of the cacao and just sort of let it integrate, you know? So it's been really cool. And then we'll do like an oracle reading at the end. And so everything we just like wrote down ends up coming out in the reading. And I always like laugh and I'm like, this is so crazy. Because I'll be like, this month I want, you know, to open my heart space. And then I'll pull some card that's literally all about heart-centered, you know, energy. So I'm like, oh, it just makes me feel like there is a structure and like we do have this like ability to work with, you know, these things instead of like against them. So there's like more of a flow there. So yeah.
I'm just sitting here smiling, wildly nodding.
Yeah, I guess I like took over for a second. But it's beautiful. Just, you know, giving like my experience of this is just me doing it, you know, full and new moons. For full moons, I'm tired.
Yeah.
And I just made this post like about full moon rituals, sometimes like taking a nap and crying, but it's because I'm like so emotional and I'm tired. So for full moons, I'm like, I'll take like a kava instead of, you know, because cacao is like energizing. So I'll have like kava and maybe do like one card, you know, and that's it. And I'm done. And I don't write anything down. And I just like honor that sometimes. Sometimes I might do something else, but I couldn't imagine like doing your class and really focusing on each phase. So could you like maybe like walk us through some of the phases? So, you know, we've got new, like what comes after that? Like what's the
crescent is next. Okay. So you're moving from exactly what you're saying, you know, this like, because the new moon is exactly about letting go and making space for what's coming in new, right? Okay. So what you're doing is exactly, at least the way I interpret it too, is exactly right on. I mean, and I'm with you. I am totally energized at new moon. New moon's my like, woo, you know,
right. That's when I like make plans and stuff.
And by full moon, I'm like, oh my God, I cannot do anymore. You know, like, I just need to nap through full moons, quite honestly. I mean, it's very rare that I feel energetic. Right. So I'm actually very in sync with you on that. So anyway, so the new moon is that, you know, kind of setting this intention, this space of, okay, well, I'm putting it out here. I'm going to start naming things or, you know, just starting to bring it in from the ethers, you know, and it's draft. I always consider everything draft, you know, because it's not going to stay the same through the phases. So crescent then is when things are starting to come to life. And that's really when we start feeling into what would it be like if this were in the world, you know, if my intention already is in the world. I get chills every time I talk about this kind of stuff, but you know, it's really kind of that bringing into body. And then of course that's going to be informed by which sign the moon is in and just, you know, all the other pieces of that. And then you get into first quarter moon, and then you're talking about time to start taking action on this. And people, again, I get real careful around this phase because people take action to mean like that goal-oriented kind of, I have to do X, Y, and Z, and it's got to be orderly, and you know, and people just tend to want to see some product after, you know, kind of being, it's a little airy before that, you know, it's again ethereal, it's not formed, and they're like, well, I'm going to form it, and it's like, yeah, hang on, you know,
let it integrate kind of.
Yeah, and more so, you know, it's not so much about goals as it is, as, you know, really it's about, it's more about allowing, you know. Okay. For me, it's not so much what do you need to do, although it's time to take action. Absolutely it is. But first, back up and tune into who do I need to be? What kind of being is required for this action?
Right, like working on yourself and not really putting the outward work in yet, but like reflecting and like what do I need to shift to be the ready for that.
Because we're still in the waxing phase, right? It's not, we're not at full potential yet. Right. So this is, you know, again, everything's part of this process of growth and evolution and building upon itself. So, you know, and I'm really cautious too of, because people are like, okay, what's coming next? You know, if I know what I need to do in action, I'm going to have to peek ahead to gibbous moon. Well, no, actually, you got to be right here,
be present,
right now. You got 3 days, basically. You know, for the most part, it's 3 days. You know, you have that day before, the day of, and the day after, and sometimes there's a little bit of overlap, and we get a little bit longer, like a 4 or 5 day window. And they start to morph, you know, into one another. And sometimes, you know, and I honor this because everybody, again, is in a totally different time frame with the cycle.
Right.
Sometimes people are ready to go ahead, and I'm not going to stop them, or they're still working on something past. So, you know, it's just kind of taking, okay, where are you? And here's the kind of influences, and here's the support, and here's what's available right now. So what do you want to do with it? You know, and that's really what we do in the circle, and in the speaking, and in the journaling, and the writing, and some of the in-depth kind of self-discovery work. And then it's time to move. And it's interesting because you start to feel it. You know, you just start to feel like, oh, okay, I'm not done, but but I don't need to stay and finish either, right? So it's cool. That's another great thing about the moon. The moon's like, come on, keep moving. You know, there's more coming. And so then we get to gibbous phase, and that's really about surrendering. You know, okay, I've done my work, right? I've waxed this. I've moved this along this arc, and I've started with, you know, my intention, and I've started to feel it, and I started to take action, and now it's time to say, okay, I just have to let it go where it's going to go. Something better is coming maybe than I can even imagine. So it's really, that phase is really about starting to release control of and directing this whole thing. And then that slips right into full moon. And full moon is like, whatever you thought it might be, guess what? Here it all is, you know, the great illumination, the wholeness. Now it's not just, you know, I think I'm doing this thing. It's like, oh, if I do this thing, then this other thing happened, right? And so then you get the whole circle kind of happened, the full illumination. I just love that about the full moon is like, you know, there's 2 ways of looking at this, and that's kind of the dualistic nature that kind of gets merged at the full moon is like, well, the shadows are the strongest and the brightest lights, right? Okay. And there's also no shadows in the brightest light, you know, so it's like, it's an interesting thing that happens. There's a great alchemy that happens at the full moon, especially as you're building up and then you start moving. And then so afterwards, and people who've done this circle multiple times, like they're like, oh, please don't say it's disseminating moon. And I'm just like, haha, you know, this is, you know, I've got Scorpio rising, so I love shadow work. So that's what disseminating moon is about. Okay, well, now after all this exposure from the full moon, now we're looking at, you know, what came out of that, you know, the shadows, the dark stuff, the stuff that hasn't been fully integrated or has been resisting integration, or we've been resisting integration. So it's a really good time to kind of do all this adjusting action, right? Like, okay, all right, I saw a bunch of stuff. And we're also moving back into the darkness, right? You know, the moon is moving away, you know, turning from the sun, and so we start to see, you know, the dark coming across the face of the moon, and so it's like this, it's okay. You know, we just did all this work, and it's okay to start, you know, stepping back and going in a little bit again. And then that's when third quarter comes around, and then we're talking about release. And that's also a fun one because, you know, you've done all this work, you've held this intention, you know, we've done all this work around all of this, and it's like, wait a minute, you know, like, you know, we deal with our attachments at that point. And so it's just a great place to, and it's interesting because in the circle, I treat it totally different than every other moon phase. Every moon phase has its own characteristic, but, you know, there's some very specific rituals we do around that, and they're kind of hard, actually, you know, because it is really, I mean, I'm serious about release, you know. And you really have to let it go.
And that's the whole reason you're doing it. Like, you're guiding this person because, you know, you want them to be aware of, like, why are you in this class in the first place? Why did you feel called to this? Obviously, you came to me, and so we're going to get you know, to the root of this. Like, so yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so then after, you know, two kind of difficult, those are usually the harder two for most people, especially because they've watched their original intention dissolve and completely turn into something else. And I mean, they're just still kind of reeling from that. And it's just kind of like, you know, I'm also Capricorn sun, so I'm like...
I'm Capricorn moon, so...
Yeah, so kind of the old crone comes out and it's like, you'll be fine.
Right.
This is nothing. So then, you know, we get to balsamic moon phase, and that's just the sweetness of gratitude and thanking our teachers, you know, the many teachers that show up around the wheel. And so that's kind of the flow of it.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So, like, when you're working with people, can you almost, like, just tell what their sign is? Like, the person that, like, keeps trying to look ahead, or, you know, the person that's, like, dreading the release. It's like, could you almost predict, like, their energies?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because at first I was trying to keep myself from doing that because I didn't want to, you know, put people into a category, and it's like, okay, I know how you're going to act. But it was really funny because, I mean, eventually, very quickly, we become very close because we're sharing really deep and intimate processes, whether we're sharing intimate information that's up to each person to bring in as much. But we end up feeling very comfortable together, and that just inevitably happens.
Right.
So we get to this place where we can joke in kind of sardonic ways with each other.
Right.
It's like, oh, there's that Virgo again, you know.
Yeah.
And I usually point myself out more than anyone else, quite honestly. I'm like, oh, there's that coming through.
Because we all have that resistance against, like, either a sign that we have in our chart or a sign that maybe harmed us or something in the past. So we have, like, I always wonder, you know, we just went through, like, the Virgo thing. Okay, well, my ex was a Virgo. And so I've really thought I had released a lot of the trauma, okay? But when we were going through this Virgo month, the whole time I kept kind of getting triggered, and I wasn't thinking about it until recently, and I was like, you know why I probably didn't like this month? It's because, like, all those things that he would, like, nitpick me about, and, like, you know, like his organization, and like that's where my focus has been all month, because I just, like, started this podcast during Virgo. So of course I'm gonna be, like, having to plan, and everything has to be so organized. But it was weird because, like, I was, like, kind of emotional through it, and I was like, I bet it's because it was bringing up, like, that energy, and the main Virgo that comes to mind just happened to be this toxic person. But it's interesting how in the past couple months I've been getting introduced to Virgos that are, like, really healthy and that are, you know, that use all these things appropriately. So it's interesting. I would be interested to see if, like, you did the moon circle every month, like, if there was particular signs that you struggle with, like I did this month. So yeah, people kind of come in with that knowing already. I have my signs, and I finally, actually, through the moon, my first round of moon circles, I came to terms with Leo. I actually befriended Leo. That was a really, really hard thing. I still have two that I struggle with that I will leave unnamed. But, you know, I'm aware of the struggle. And so, you know, I think exactly what you're talking about. It's the trauma or the undeveloped sides of it, or kind of the shadow sides of it that just get us under our skin. And it's just interesting to see it come out and be like, oh, it's that again, you know? I feel like I need to, like... Because, you know, obviously the Virgo was a big thing, but I have had, like, discourse with, like, Sagittarius suns. And so I'm like, that might be the moon I need to do it with, because there's something about the bluntness of Sagittarius that just rubs my Capricorn the wrong way. Because like, with, you know, all about this with Capricorn, we really think about everything we say. And I, you know, like, I beat myself up sometimes, like, oh, I said it wrong, and I really think about it. But then the Sagittarius comes in and just, you know, just says whatever and leaves, and you're just like, I can't believe you said that. But, you know, like there's obviously a lot of good to that too, but I feel like that might be the moon that I need to work on, like, because I feel like it might trigger me.
Yeah, so let me throw this in, is that, remember, the moon visits them each time. So, yes, I think obviously when the overtone is that Sagittarius, that there's going to be some reckoning. I think, no, actually, I'm trying to think how I came to terms with Leo. Leo actually... Gosh, I don't remember how it was now. I don't remember which cycle, how it worked. But anyway, Leo and Scorpio were lined up.
Okay.
And one of the moon phases, and I just don't remember who was which.
Right.
But this story came through about how complementary they are to each other.
Right.
And how the stuff that normally Leo kind of gets the bad rap for, you know, just the charmer, spotlighter kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, Scorpio saw that totally differently. You know, seeing Leo through Scorpio's eyes, and then Scorpio gets, you know, also hated on for, you know, the hag and, you know, all that stuff.
I have
like
some Scorpio, like Menhaven and stuff, so I've had to deal with that.
Yeah, and so, but Leo, you know, and, you know, the hag also has this, like, tattered stuff, but Leo saw the gold threads in the tattered, you know, in her tattered cloak. And so there was this whole story that kind of came out.
That's so beautiful.
And, yeah, and so what I would offer is just that, again, each moon cycle, you have this opportunity to visit, to have these hard relationships kind of moved, right? Because sometimes, you know, that, so say for you it's Sagittarius, well, what happens when that happens at crescent moon? And then what happens if it comes at gibbous? And what happens if it comes at third quarter? You know, how are you going to relate differently to that sign?
Yeah.
And especially through the lens of either the overtone or where the sun is. Or, so it's rich and it keeps moving. And so, yeah, I offer that, you know, just be open to it coming when it comes. But if you have a sense of something, follow that. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Like when you look at it through a different lens, you know, I studied archetypes for a while, and I was always kind of put off by the comedian. My ex was also a stand-up comedian. So, you know, so I had this thing, and then it took me years to really accept like there's an actual purpose for the comedian. And, you know, I actually went years and didn't watch a comedy. Okay. And, you know, like I just went through this wave where I could see the beauty and like, oh, we need to laugh, you know, we need to laugh at ourselves. Like we don't need to be so serious. So it's funny how we're kind of like repulsed by these things, but then we hit this moment where like we get this healthy example of that archetype or the sign or whatever. So that's interesting that was Leo for you. So Emerson, my son, is a Leo. So I always, you know, I've had a good relationship with that. What is it? The South Node is like your past life. So that was my Leo. It's like the only Leo. But like I have none in the rest of my chart. Like I don't see Leo show up again. So I'm like, maybe I just like already faced all that Leo energy in this time. You know, I gave birth to a Leo, but I actually don't have any in my chart. So it's interesting how that all plays out. You know?
Yeah, and that you should have a Leo brought in so intimately and closely. So, you know, there's greater balance, right? We hold our own balance, and then, you know, it just keeps rippling out with our closest people.
Right. Yeah, because I've been doing astrology or studying it on a deeper level for probably like 3 months. Obviously, I've always dabbled, but then I'll take breaks and have to like completely relearn it, you know, because I forget. But this time I've like been serious about it, and I keep my chart on my phone now. So I'm like, when I read something, I'll go look, and I'm like, okay, where is it? So it's been easier, but I don't know. It's just explained a lot, you know, in relation to like the people that live in my house, like my husband, my son, my daughter, and it's really like allowed me to see them differently and like not be so irritated when they do something, because I'm like, that is just kind of their core thing, you know. It's like a way to really like truly love a person and allow them to be themselves. It's so cool. Like not try to change them, but like work with those energies, you know. So, and
you're speaking somewhat for what I understand is astral navigation, right?
Right. Yeah.
The chart is relational.
Right.
You know, this is all about relationships as far as I'm concerned. Relationships of the different bodies and stars, constellations, and ourselves to it, and ourselves to other. And so,
right, it's like as above, so below. Like
absolutely.
This is happening to us on a personal level, but it's also happening in the cosmos somewhere. Like these relationships just exist, and they're always, you know, these people are always passing through some other person's life or their story, and so it's so cool to see how it all connects.
Isn't
you
it?
know?
Yes,
for sure. Okay, let's see. Are there other moon rituals besides the journaling that you do? So like how I do the cacao, do you just like channel it all into the journal, or?
Well, the journal is just kind of a record keeper.
Okay.
Because it's just a great way to kind of look back, or yeah, it's a good way to put it, is just the record keeper. Just
okay.
So it's a device. It's a recording device. And it is also ritual. I believe writing is ritual. You know, writing is bringing from the ethers down into the ink, onto the paper.
Like
you know,
spelling.
yeah, exactly. and it's also, for me, very elemental. You know, it's pulling all the elements together.
Right.
You know, paper being earth, liquid ink, and you know, ethereal, and so you know, there's alchemy in that process of writing. I believe writing is, you know, well, Jung. You know,
yes.
I mean, do we need to say more there? But
for sure,
you know, so writing is really the subconscious, and most, you know, a lot of the prompts are, I guess, driven, if you want to say, by subconscious, unconscious, you know, the stream of consciousness too. So it's not just answer this question, it's stuff is coming up. Where are you going with it? You know, okay, so take a record of it. What's playing out in your mind? And so the rituals around the writing would be, we use different techniques.
Okay.
So writing in different shapes, or, you know, there's a lot of different ways, because again, I'm a writing teacher. I've done lots of study in composition theory and felt sense, and Sandra Pearl is one of my heroes, and you know, and writing down the bones, Natalie Goldman, you know, all these wonderful writers who just get you out of that, you know, that linear logical thinking. And of course, you know, we've all been trained to the 5-paragraph essay, and, you know, and I'm just like, let's get that out of here right now. You know, like we're gonna rediscover the power of writing and the power of our voice coming across, you know, in this method. So it is actually more of a ritualistic kind of meditative and spiritual practice than what you might think of a writing circle. But yes, other rituals come in and they change and they morph. And I'm just remembering one circle right now. So one of the rituals we do is we always build an altar together each time we come together. So everyone brings in a piece. And of course, each time the altar is based on the astrological influences. So, you know, if it's Virgo, okay, let's bring some earth stuff in, or bring in, you know, for new moon, we'll bring in things, you know, that tie us to our intention and somehow, or being in that intentional space. So kind of, you know, what things start grounding or pulling in or drawing in, or, you know, where does something that energetically holds that feeling or that space of that particular mode and time. And then, you know, the next altar will be based on the next cycle that we're together, and the next astrological sign, and, you know, all that stuff. And so it morphs. And one time we ended up just bringing all these roses in. It was just like, and someone had a statue of the Virgin Mary, and just like, it was like this, it was like the most divinely inspired, co-created kind of ritual. And that's kind of how they all turn out. Like, I have an idea or something comes through, and I just kind of pitch it, and then we just build from there. So it's cool. It's a really, so I can't say there's one particular ritual, but ritual is deeply embedded in this process. Yeah,
that's awesome. Let's see. In regards to energy coaching, what are some ways that you encourage your clients to attune to their inner wisdom?
Yeah. So this is a big shift from where we just were.
Sorry. Well,
no, it's good. It's good.
I want to get into a little bit of everything.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And actually the coaching does inform this circle work, especially because of the energy body. People, especially when they're writing, tend to get in their minds, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so the energy coaching and the way that I work with coaching through the energy body is, let's drop that. Where does it happen for you? Yeah, you're thinking this, but stop.
Right.
Stop that for a second and, just even close your eyes, just tune in. And then, our body is infinitely intelligent. And if we can just listen, and that starts by tuning in, then what comes through? And so that's really kind of my premise of, one that works in the circle, but that's where the energy coaching comes in, is just that I hear you saying this, but I feel this, right? Because we often are thinking what we want to be saying and what we should be saying and what we need to say in order to be this person or achieve this thing. And so we convince ourselves that that's right. But when you're really listening and you're listening from a tonal kind of resonance, your words are going this direction, but your energy is somewhere else. And so I like to follow that energy, and I help people drop in and get in touch with that.
So is that like when I was reading your website and it's like tuning into their energy body, is that how you're doing that? It's like you're coaching them and you're putting them, in that intuitive kind of mind, and not like the monkey mind, but like...
Yeah. See, I've had this problem my whole life that people will say something and I'm like, that's not what you're saying.
Right.
And like kind of what I was just explaining, but it's always gotten me in trouble. So I figured out how to use it to
work with them.
Yeah, to work with them. And, for me, it's more about helping them listen to themselves. And really reflecting. So I'm very sensitive to language. I'm very sensitive to the vibration of words. I'm sensitive to the meanings up in my brain, as well as where does that land in my body. And so I just check that out with them. I'm like, I heard you say this, but I'm feeling, what I felt was that sort of how I sense your energy is around this is quite different, and
than how they're expressing it, maybe.
And so when we track back to that and I reflect, or another thing that usually happens, and this is really, I think, where it starts to become very clear and illuminated for them, is they'll have convinced themselves of one thing, and then I don't follow the problems, we're not going to try and figure out the root of that problem. That's not the path we're going.
Right.
So at some point, something will shift through their own process of talking through something, or we'll have dropped down and gotten into the body, or sometimes I'll lead a guided meditation, or, whatever is needed in the moment, I just kind of play with. And obviously with consent and if it feels right to them. But it's interesting because within 30 minutes usually of a session, all of a sudden there's just like, it really is a switch that flips. It's just, and then like this rush of energy will come, and then it's like you can feel their words and their energy are matched. And I'll just like sit back and just like, not laughing at them, but just this giddiness comes up because like, the shift happened, and then I'll just, I'll obviously give them the time to do that. And then I'll say, did you just hear yourself? Do you feel how differently that felt than that thing you said 20 minutes ago? And they're just like, oh. And the thing is that everyone has this within them. Everyone has this gift. Everyone has the ability to move their energy, to shift their thinking, to, again, this is this innate wisdom. The body is infinitely wise. It also has infinite healing abilities.
Right.
And the only thing in the way of that is ourselves. Right. That's the truth of it. And so to be able to offer that reflection of that before and after, and it doesn't even matter what the shift is about. We don't have to capture that and put that in a bottle so you can drink it anytime later. Right. It's, can you feel this? Can you remember this feeling?
Right. So in the future, when you feel like, okay, I had this thought, but my feelings are different, I'm going to, like maybe they just speak out loud, like, and start talking about it. And I get like this, like just talking to my friends or something, if I'm having a bad day, and I'll hear myself and I'm like, there's that advice, you know, if I would just take my own advice, but it is there, but sometimes you have to talk with someone or write, you know, or do something to get it out for you to feel into that versus the thinking.
Yeah.
You know?
Sometimes it's about clearing and other times it's about dropping.
Okay.
And there's a big difference in those two processes, and both of them are good and equal, and they have their place.
How would you explain the difference between those, like dropping versus clearing?
Okay, so clearing might be like you're saying, talking it out, writing it out, dancing it out, you know, doing something to kind of like, it's a kind of an external kind of shifting. You know, I need to employ something to make this change, you know. Dropping is kind of more like a surrender to just be with it. And so when you feel that angst and you're like, okay, I need to go dance, or I need to go write this out, and I'm like, okay, hold on, you know, like stop. You know, it's that stop and drop kind of thing. And biodynamics talks about dropping in. It's a phenomenon, and that happens that when there's and it goes with yoga nidra as well, and yoga, and, you know, the practice of all of these things is that there's a certain point that you just, like, everything down tempos and everything just relaxes, and you can start to, one, attune, and two, hear. You can start listening. And that's the place of that dropping, is that you drop out of thinking mind, you drop out of ego body, you drop out of our knowing anything, and it's just this place of, it's a pure place, and it sometimes it's very hard to get to, and like I'm just sitting here now and I'm just like, oh, I can just go right now, but we got to keep talking. So you know, that's the other thing that I think that comes through the moon circles, and then also in the coaching, and that comes from that biodynamic realm, is that there's a certain point to stop talking. There's a certain point to stop doing, and sometimes even a time to stop being. Right.
That's a really beautiful way to think about it. And I'm definitely guilty of sometimes, like I'm moving, and, you know, I was talking the other day, and I was picked this yoga video out because I was kind of stressed, and I was like, I want to move, you know, and I want to get this out. And I was thinking active. And then I hit play, you know, it's like in this series. So I was like, it's just the next one. I hit play. And it's basically a meditation, you know, and like I kind of might have moved my arms a little, but it was like super slow. And I was so annoyed, you know, I was like, man, I just wanted to move. I didn't want to think. I don't want to sit with this, but I did it, you know, because I was like, obviously something's trying to tell me that I don't want to just like ignore it by trying to flow right now. And so I, you know, by the end, I just started laughing and I was like, this is exactly what I needed. And it's actually happened to me since then, you know, where I was like, okay, I'm going to distract myself with exercise, and then turn something on, and it's like there's blankets and props and all this. I was like, I guess we're not working out in this video, you know. But that is the beauty of, like, there's something totally different, and both are necessary. Like you said, the clearing is necessary sometimes. You know, dancing has been a huge therapy for me, but also just like releasing any attachment to what's going to happen, you know, in a session or just in a meditation or something. It's definitely, there's some magic there that, you know, I don't know why we just resist it so much, you know, like, I guess it's our whole culture is so fast paced, and like you said, it's like in the moon journaling, like they're like looking ahead and like, what's the action I need to take? What's the next step? And, you know, maybe in other cultures, they teach that better, you know, while they're young, and like that just letting things flow or just being. But I don't know, it's something that has, like, we have to learn because it wasn't just passed down to us, you know.
Yeah, well, we have to remember it. We have to go deeper back into ourselves and remember our ancient stardust bones.
Right. Okay. I love that. That's a beautiful analogy. Our true, like, source.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
All right. Let's see about the time. Okay. So, Could you explain a little bit about the yoga nidra and how you use it? I mean, I feel like we kind of already maybe dabbled in the dropping in. Probably. I feel like that's you probably.
Yeah. Yes, it's similar. The yoga nidra is really it's kind of a guiding principle. I'm sure you've talked about this when you talked with Philip. I remember listening to it, but the idea of yoga was to still the mind.
Right.
It's to get the body ready to sit in stillness. And so yoga nidra is like the next, evolution of that process into, okay, now that the body can relax, now what does the nervous system do? And then what does consciousness do? And then yoga nidra is also, it's another form of guided meditation. It's an ancient practice that, we've kind of morphed into more guided meditation in our culture now in these times. But, and it's, again, in our ancient remembrance of it, it's this place that we can find this, just what you're talking about, find this safe place to be still and allow our bodies through breath and the chemical alchemy of that to allow us to travel is essentially what we're doing.
Right. That's interesting. I did the Sufi retreat. I kind of brought it up a little bit with Philip, I think, but it was a whole weekend, so there was a lot of little techniques we did, but we did the thing mystical meditation, and it was you lay on the ground, and I'd never, I've done like savasana or whatever, but I'm not really, I'm kind of just like, I don't know, like trying to relax at that point. But the mystical meditation was different, and it really was a lot of like astral traveling happened there because I don't know, it's like my body was so relaxed and comfortable that it was like my energy felt safe to explore. So that weekend, like I probably will talk about it a lot on this show because it was really beautiful to be able to do that stuff and be super conscious of it. So we lucid dream and we astral project all the time, when we're sleeping, but maybe we don't have the control like we do in like when you're laying on the, and you're really relaxed like that. And that's, I don't know. I feel like if we could all like practice that and learn that, like we would have this access to this almost like this whole other world of knowledge, that comes from, something that's like in that stillness, but if you're never still, if you're rushing, then you lose that connection, so.
And that's where the fear comes in, I think for people to stop and sit still is then what am I going to have to face?
Yeah.
But the beauty of yoga nidra, I think, in my experience, is that I don't want to say it's a trick, but it kind of is. It's like it's tricking your mind out of believing itself and allowing for more possibilities than you can imagine, And so to allow, first, because it is there. It's a studied approach, and there are different phases that you walk through, right? Whether you're leading it or participating in it. And I have to tell you, having done it and led it, I get the same rich reward as having, being the one laying down and receiving it, because it's, we're all in the same field. And
exactly.
And so this process of, allowing the body to truly relax and that nervous system to drop, and then, getting into these, really it's altered states of consciousness, and that's just through voice and suggestion and, allowing your body to feel warm and then cold and then heavy and then light. And it's just like nothing is changing around you. Your mind is creating that, and that's, again, I'm not a master in any way, shape, or form, but to me that feels like the richness of the lesson or the learning that happens in that is, if I can do that there.
Right. then I can like you can carry it with you, and like you can drop in whenever you might need to, or you need an answer.
Yeah, if I can make myself feel cold, I can make myself feel healthy. Like, you know, and it's not just about opposites. It's not just, but it, you know, that helps the contrast to see how much, you know, really what can your body do physically, sensation wise, to create what feels like an atmosphere or an environment.
Right.
But it's all internal.
Exactly.
Or is it?
Right. Or, that is the question. That's awesome. So as we come to the end of our episode, could you share with us the best way to contact you or to keep up with future events?
Sure. I have a website. It's connectedbeing333.com.
Okay.
And I will be posting more information there, but it's all the information about the different modalities that I offer, and blending at all times. You know, coaching isn't just coaching. Astral navigation isn't just that. So I'm really open to, you know, blending and tailoring anything as it comes up. And then I'll also be posting any of the moon circles. I'm intending to have a moon circle for Libra.
Okay.
And that'll be on Tuesday evenings starting October 5th, and that would be through the 26th. And then that's most likely going to be online. I do have, we have people from all over the country that like to come out for those. And,
okay.
But I'm hoping to be able to do an in-person Scorpio moon cycle. That's a real, that one's a really good one to be in person with. There's a, you know, thinning of the veil and all that great stuff. So it's real tangible energy, and it's very likely that I would offer online and in person, but I just have to kind of see how that all goes. But all of that information will be on the website, and of course, I have a Instagram account by the same name, Connected Being 333, and then on Facebook it's just Connected Being. So yeah, all that information will be there, so you can check that out. And then I have a newsletter.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up. I signed up for the newsletter. Awesome. So is that, you know, once a month you update?
Yeah, this is a new moon blessing, so because that's my celebration time. So I offer that writing, and then journal prompts and self-care reminders, and then whatever news has come up as far as whatever events I might be hosting or any kind of thing like that will be in the newsletter, and that's just once a month. And if I do have a circle, I'll use that same mailing list to just say, hey, just so you know, there's a circle coming up. And
okay, awesome. Well, I'm definitely going to be participating in a circle soon, so I'm like really excited about it. So, well, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your beautiful work with us. And thank you all for tuning in. Make sure to join us next week on the Astral Hour. Talk to you soon.